Good afternoon, colleagues. On behalf of SAIA Practice, welcome to all SAIA members, friends of SAIAshare, and especially those who have joined us for the first time. My name is Eugene Barnard. I am joined by Emil Paulsen. We will be your hosts for the afternoon. Good afternoon to
everybody.
you, Emil.
Good afternoon, Eugene.
And then, yes, good afternoon, Emil. Corina Gibson from ECPD is here again to make sure everything runs smoothly. Welcome, Corina. We do hope you will enjoy SAIAshare number 23 with us this afternoon. It is rather special. Today is SAIAshare's second birthday. The first event was held exactly 2 years ago in May 2021. Time flies. Please participate by posting questions or comments in the questions box. In session 2 this afternoon, Eugene Marais, also a Eugene, will be speaking on the very relevant topic, printing the future. How 3D printing will revolutionize architecture. But to begin with, session 1, Emil will introduce you to our first presenter. Emil, over to you.
Thank you very kindly, Eugene. Graham Wilson, our first presenter for this afternoon, graduated from the University of Natal with a Bachelor of Architecture in 1981, joined Osmond Lange Architects in 1984, where he became director in 1989. Osmond Lange was established way back in 1929 and is one of the larger architectural and interior design practices in South Africa. The company has built up extensive design and technological expertise, specializing in large projects, and has actively participated in some of the largest joint ventures in South Africa as lead consultants. Osmond Lange has undertaken work across various sectors, including commercial offices, residential, retail, industrial, education, and healthcare. Graham, it would be an honor if you are able to put on your camera just for a moment so that we can all know who we are talking to. But in the interim, I would like to express that you've gained so much experience over the years. I know that you have a passion for context in design. And we really look forward with much expectation to your talk this afternoon. Thank you very much, Graham, for being with us. Graham, apologies, you are muted. Just a technical jump.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There we go. We hear you now loud and clear, perfectly.
Okay, great.
Terrific.
Thanks very much for that lofty introduction. I think this is very much a personal journey in architecture, and I stress architecture. It's not necessarily a lecture on urbanism, but obviously urbanism definitely has a big influence in everything. So I'm going to switch off now my camera and go to the presentation. Can you all see that?
Perfect. We can all see it clearly. Thanks, Graham. Over to you.
Thanks, Emil. So basically, next 20 minutes, I want to just touch on a couple of the major influences in my architectural career. Admittedly, it's been a journey of bewilderment in a quest to create good architecture, whatever that means. The journey starts back in 1976, the year a 17-year-old compulsive car doodler enrolled at the University of Natal. He wanted to design cars, but there was no faculty of car design. So, inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright, architecture was a very close second on the list, art third, and probably accounting a very poor fourth on the list. So arriving at University of Otago, this is the first compulsory reading book that was thrust into our innocent and hungry hands. Theory and Design in the First Machine Age, written by Rainer Banham in 1960. And I quote the author here: "We throw the out-of-date tool on the scrap heap, the carbine, the growler, and the old locomotive. This action is a manifestation of health, of moral health, of morale also. It is not right that we should produce bad things because of a bad tool, nor is it right that we should waste our energy, our health, and our courage because of a bad tool. It must be thrown away and replaced. We must invent and rebuild ex novo our modern city like an immense and tumultuous shipyard, active, mobile, and everywhere dynamic, and the modern building like a gigantic machine." According to modernist theory, the primary cultural problem of design is giving expression to the dominant technologies of the time. It would seem that 60 years later, these same ideas about time and style still seem to dominate the education of some architects. The architect, in his role as the future's messenger, leads to the triumph of the timely over the timeless. Like young soldiers going to war, we were willingly brainwashed into believing that the past was the enemy and must be rejected on all fronts. And who could help being inspired by some of these amazing buildings of the modern movement? Philip Johnson's glass house, who could not be seduced by this beautiful image. But now into second year, and having zealously ingested the gospel of modernism, and the next piece of compulsory reading put a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons, Complexity and Contradiction in Architecture by Robert Venturi. It was fondly referred to as Bob by our studio master Dennis Claude. This was first published in 1966 and marked the early stirrings of the postmodern movements of rebellion against the purism of the modern movement. The definition of postmodernism goes as follows. Postmodernism is an eclectic, colorful style of architecture and the decorative arts that appeared from the late 1970s and continues in some form today. It emerged as a reaction to modernism and the modern movement and the dogmas associated with it. So, in Robert Venturi's own words, hybrid rather than pure, compromising rather than clean, distorted rather than straightforward, ambiguous rather than articulated, perverse as well as impersonal, boring as well as interesting, conventional rather than designed, accommodating rather than excluding, redundant rather than simple, vestigial as well as innovating, inconsistent and equivocal. And Venturi's comparison between the characteristics of modernism and their counterparts in the postmodernism: simplification and complexity, exclusivity and tension, unity and messy vitality. And as a direct head-on to the modern movement's slogan of less is more, Venturi stated, "Less is a bore. Incorporate historical elements, unusual materials, use fragmentation and modulations while giving primary emphasis to the facade." Needless to say, the postmodernist hype wore off fairly quickly, and the truth of the modern movement still had meaning. Going back to the, shall I call it, clarity of the modern movement, from the dawn of the modern movement, modern architecture has been about the making of things as opposed to places, and has favored disengagement of those things from what is around them. I would sort of hazard a guess that many examples of postmodern movement could also be accused of the same thing. But modernism has two fiercely held ideas about style. One, it doesn't exist, and 2, it is inexorably linked to time. Both of these have crippled architecture's ability to respond stylistically to the demands of place. So let's start the third year by trying to understand what was happening immediately prior to the modern movement. And this is where I found personal resonance in the arts and crafts, Art Nouveau, Art Deco eras, where they moved away from the previous historic style, but incorporated decoration of another kind in their design. The all-encompassing design of everything, from the spoons to a complete building, by Charles Rennie Mackintosh, was so cool and beautiful. It was like having a secret pleasure that you didn't dare admit, especially amongst your purest friends and company. So what we can learn from the pre-modern is a concept of style and a mastery of styles that allow them to be interested in the past, but not obsessively, and interested in the future, but not slavishly. It was a concept of style that never produced a dogma more important to the pre-modernists than the places in which they were built. Architecture is this in the service of space, demands stylistic literacy. This concept was all but banished from modern architectural education as just hearsay. And I just want to mention one more great influence at university, coming closer to home, was Hans Hallen, architect and urbanist. I quote from Google: "He attempted to relate the forms and structures of buildings to the site, social context, and appropriate construction method. He traveled, sketched, wrote, photographed, and generally acted as an all-purpose cultural busybody. He believed that architecture is an art, and that to earn universal validity, the work must have its roots in the particular." Moving on, we've left university now, and we're struggling to figure out what is our mission in life. And obviously, every magazine you open, you're looking at amazing star architecture. Star architects like Zaha Hadid. And I'll read here: "She designed the Fino Science Center in Wolfsburg, Germany, which was also completed in 2005. The New York Times called it the kind of building that utterly transforms our vision of the future." So going back to that whole thing where our job is to deliver the future. Meteoric architectural careers are based on the ability to produce work that is news and truth simultaneously. The news part is crucial. It has to be news about the social and technological imperatives of the age, which means that these imperatives have to change all the time to be news. Since building technology and social conditions don't change fast enough to keep up with the media's demand for news, new architectural imperatives have to be sourced further afield: linguistics, post-structuralism, aeroplane design, software, feminist literary criticism, global consumerism, etc., etc. And I've inserted a completely blank slide here to just indicate a slight rest up. With the demands of clients and authorities added to the equation, it can all end up in an architect going completely mad. Having a strong belief system, but being forced by these clients and municipalities to believe something contradictory at the same time is a cause for schizophrenia. Some architects simply renounce their beliefs, enter the bordello, and are reborn as marketects, purveyors of stylistic kitsch made of synthetic materials. Some do it willingly, but others retain enough of their original belief system to be racked by lifelong guilt. There is, however, a kind of architecture based on an alternative form of truth that avoids all these problems. It satisfies the architect's need to be a messenger of truth and not just a purveyor of kitsch. The subject's urbanism, the history of the city. And that's where I basically found my personal truth. In 1995, 14 years after graduating, we were approached by the Mines Pension Fund Properties to look at a tract of land they'd assembled in Joburg's northern suburbs to develop an office park. Knowing we were a little bit out of our depth, we first approached Paul Weigers, who then who inspired us and in turn introduced us to Paul Moraine, the founder of the New Urbanism movement and joint author of this wonderful manual. Here's a picture of us, a bit of a fuzzy picture. Paul Moraine, Paul Whitehead, my partner, me, and Paul Weigers, 3 Pauls and me. In several short weeks, we were complete converts to New Urbanism. And amongst the kind of things that you'd see in responsive environments, it's just so obvious. It's about placemaking and not just a bunch of buildings like corbs just sprinkled across the landscape. This is a diagram that we use often in any explanation of what the difference is between conventional and traditional. So we started on our journey of looking at Melrose Arch and followed these principles. I'm not going to, they're pretty well known to most people. It's not what I want to concentrate on. Here's on the left, a drawing that was done early days by somebody for Melrose Arch as an office park. Basically pretty much like Corb's drawing there. And on the right, the drawing that we all put together in a period of about a week, actually. And a very, very simple system, basically pretty much like a shopping center, a magnet on either end consisting of squares and an active high street linking the two. So going through Melrose, there's the essential ingredient, a high street. I want to quote from the patron saint of urbanism. Streets and their sidewalks, the main public spaces of a city, are its most vital organs. Streets need walls, surfaces of buildings of sufficient continuity and consistency that they define the shape of streets. There's not a single satisfactory urban place in the world that does not follow the principle that buildings must define the space of streets. And I'm probably ramming it in, but it just seems to be a thing that doesn't seem to compute to so many architects that I've worked with. And this is another thing, normative, inexpensive construction can create an enduring place because of the qualities of the urban space and nothing else. So going back to Melrose, the next ingredient, the public square, acting as a public lounge. A boulevard, another street, different kind of function, but again, with building to the street, build two lines. And on the other side of that, there's the very, very private realm and creating great places within that private realm, where actually a lot of the architects that worked on this, and I must admit we had some fantastic architects working on Melrose Arch, and it was a pure joy working with some of these talented individuals. We're able to do things inside the courtyard, which maybe they couldn't give expression to having to follow the street edges on the outside. And just this is like most of them are, a lot of it is residential. This is a small office courtyard. This is as we moved further north, we got higher, we had more bulk, we were given more bulk, we were allowed to go more bulky. Our basement allowed us to build more without having to necessarily proportionally build more parking. And strangely enough, as we moved, not strangely, but as we moved further north, we just built higher and higher. I was quite reluctant when we did this one, whether it would be too tall, but in reflection, I think it's okay. And it's amazing how people would prefer to buy a unit facing inwards than outwards, which personally I wouldn't, but it's amazing how obviously you've created something good there. The other important thing is obviously in all architecture, there are landmark buildings. Not everything is a team player. Some have to be landmarks, and I'm not denying that. But 95% of all buildings are not landmarks. And that's one of the things that I feel a lot of young architects feel that they've got to create a landmark every time they do a building. If you follow the prescriptions of good urbanism, it doesn't have to be a landmark building. Our job is giving structure to structureless places. Architects and planners can bring bones to insert dirt into limp chickens. This is not a great success. We did a bit of work on Santon Loop, trying to put bicycle lanes in, but it was a good education in how not to build a city and how difficult it is to do anything with all the stakeholders. And just currently, I actually put some of our current projects last because I didn't think that I could, if I ran out of time, it didn't really matter. This is just near Stellenbosch, a place called Klapmuts. We're doing a thing called Stellenbosch Bridge. But what better place in South Africa can you draw on some of the culture of building towns than Stellenbosch itself? And again, a square, a main spine, a pedestrian spine, urban parks, totally mixed use, build two lines, a proper active edges, a proper urban space, which we are busy hopefully starting to do the next building within the next 6 months. And the usual architectural codes and elements. I think I'm gonna stop there because I've just hit my 20 minutes, unless anybody wants to see any more or there's no more questions. If there's no questions, Graham, I can carry on.
Graham, can I suggest you carry on?
Okay. Waterfall City was a number of different sort of well-respected urban designers in Joburg have worked on that. We were asked to look at some maybe simplistic rules back in 2016, and this is just an extract from that where I think we put together 8 rules. This was rule number 2, perimeter blocks, obviously. Very, very clear, public, private. And the sort of figure ground drawing, the difference between buildings that follow the edge, create the streets and the public spaces, and buildings with exactly the same framework of roads, but it's not creating spaces. So follow the build to line. Percentages of buildings that had to follow the building line and ones that didn't have to follow so much. And I don't know, it just seemed to be a problem that it's not rocket science, but make your main entrances face the street. Don't make a main entrance come up from a basement parking and then feed out to 4 different main entrances. Use all the activity that an entrance gives to actually activate streets. Realize that street's the important thing, not the courtyard for public. The courtyard is private. If you have canteens, if you have restaurants, please make them face the street. Make that activity add the life to the street and don't turn it inwards. We actually, even with my partner Jonathan, created our own sphere diagram with a sort of with urbanism orientation, and we use this to kind of report on some of the designs that we received to have a look at. So I was trying to put structure to sort of concepts. Then the last one I think here is what we're working on right now in Mauritius. an urban design that was done by Nathan Iyer, and then we kind of hooked onto his design, worked quite a lot on that, helping to refine some of the concepts, and then fortunately we both practices were appointed to do phase 1, which is this part over here. And I think my message here is that it's very, very simple, but use the buildings, use whatever plasticine you've got in terms of offices, residential, retail, to create a great place rather than internalize it. So we've got a great promenade here, we've got a square at one end, we've got an amphitheatre at the other end, and these are the 6 buildings that form part of the phase 1. And we're not even building the backs of the buildings. We're creating the kind of almost movie set at the front to start the whole thing going. And fortunately, then we can also not build as much parking as we have to start with, because we've got a lot of empty ground on which to build. One more point that I'm trying to talk about architecture, not necessarily urban design, but how important urban design is and how it can affect your architecture. So 47C, this is a building at the end of the promenade facing onto the amphitheatre. This was a very, very early sketch, and I thought I wanted to show this just because I believe it's got some of my great hero Charles Rennie Mackintosh in it. It responded to the fact that it was a fairly squat 4-story building, but it had a recessed colonnade. Originally hoped to emphasize the high volume and set back the first floor. Later we had to bring it out, but we kept it very much that sort of proportion. So there's the sort of elevation drawn up better than my original sketch. And here's some of the perspectives of it. It unfortunately is going to, although I always say build robust buildings, because of the downturn in office requirements, this building is now going to become a residential building. And robust it is, in fact, that it's the right sort of depth for residential, but it's not as robust as it could be for residential type of treatment on the facade. So I think I've lost that building as it looks right now. These are a couple of the other buildings done by our office. So this is finishing off. Spaces that make towns, the towns we love and go to whenever we get the chance, cannot be made by sun diagrams. And going back to Melrose, these are the spaces that people like to be in. We are foot soldiers in the making of the world. This book here, this is the last book I'm going to show, is what I got a lot of my thoughts from. It's been very inspiring to me for the last couple of years. It gives structure to the way you think. I think that's it. The city, the whole messy, complex, unbounded city is the stage upon which the drama of architecture is performed. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Graham. That was quite a journey you took us on, I must say. It's a
journey where, you know, there was a point where things change and they all made sense, and it's great to have that sort of compass in the compass. Yeah.
When was that point for you, if I may ask? You mentioned your first year experience, second year, and then after university. When did you pivot, if I may ask?
You know what? As Eugene will know, I worked in Petersburg, Polokwane for about 5 years, and we did a lot of work in the former homelands. And a lot of that was trying to make structure out of nothing. Limp, boneless chickens. It was like, how do you make something out of empty bushveld? How do you make something that's going to be significant and work? when you're doing civic centres, when you're doing agricultural colleges, when you're doing technical colleges, you're doing hospitals. There was nothing much to refer to or to draw on. And at that time, sort of subconsciously, you're drawing on urbanism, but maybe not as structured as having read responsive environments and having something to work with.
Oh, well, Graham, just from my side, while we invite comments, two already have come in. Edwin Swanepoel says, thank you, Graham, enjoyed that. And Vivian Hobbs says, very inspiring. And you know, you've really grasped the recipe of SAIAshare, if I may. You've used your experience to inspire. You've packed that into 20 minutes, and with permission, you've gone to 25, but that was a pleasure to do so. You've made your presentation so visual that it cannot but inspire, and you've told us the story. And you know, everything you said really makes perfect sense. You know, when you walk around in the cities of Europe, you can't understand why it's so pleasant to be there. And then maybe when you visit Santon and you've got to rush across these massive streets and roadways, you just don't feel comfortable. So just from my side, thank you very much. We have a comment.
I think one of the
Emil, would you like to carry on from there? Oh, sorry,
Certainly.
Graham, carry on.
Go ahead, go.
One of the sort of criticisms we've often had of Melrose is that it's a little bit frenetic, possibly. We did try to keep away from sort of dictating any specific style or materials. We wanted them to be honest. We didn't want fake materials. We didn't really want historic that didn't relate to where it was being built. And every single architect came with their theory on that, and it made for some incredibly interesting discussions. And sometimes I found it interesting in later phases, architects come and say, well, we obviously know that red brick has to be done in red brick. And I'm going to say, where did you see that in the guidelines? Not once did it say red brick, but it's, you drive around and you think, oh, this was supposed to be red brick, but it's not, you know. It's yeah. But it's great to see architects working out, making buildings bump against each other, cross over each other, canopies work with each other. It's a lovely process, that.
It's tremendous, Graham. I have a question, if I may, Eugene, be so bold as to ask Graham a question. You mentioned that some of us suffer some schizophrenia when dealing with local authorities. Now, what about on a national development plan and infrastructure development plan scale? What do you believe? Do you believe that what you have spoken to is being implemented? How can architects make our voice known when it comes to these types of broader plan approaches in our country? And
yes,
and does that make sense, more or less?
No, I think it makes sense, and I think that my thoughts are UDESA and especially the Cape Town guys are making great inroads into making sure that urban design is incorporated in any large developments and insisting that it does. And there's some great documents produced by the City of Cape Town,
Yes.
which makes it very simple and very easy to work with. And yeah, I think a lot is happening. Yeah.
Okay, no, thanks for that. I think just in general, I think we should, Eugene, perhaps get somebody like Graham to speak to us again with regards to how to implement and how to be the force for a voice within a region. Thank you. Shall I read through some of the further questions, Eugene? Or are we a bit limited?
No, I think no. You can read the questions, and maybe we can take just briefly Lynette's question. But do read the compliments and questions, Emil, then let's give ourselves another minute and a half and then we wrap up.
Certainly will do. Willie Andermark said, very informative, thank you. Pernille Martin, this talk was awesome, well done. And Sean Scriven said, thank you, great presentation. So you have a lot of kudos. And then Lynette Harding asks, was Melrose Arch set out around existing heritage buildings? The one structure in the photos looked like an original house.
Yes, the whole area consisted of something like 67 houses, of which most of them were built before 50 years before. So we had to approach the authorities to make sure, Monuments Council at the time, to allow us to demolish the houses. I believe we would have been able to demolish all of them, but we thought as a kind of memory, we would keep one of the houses, and we'd keep one of the better examples that was using the kind of Transvaal brick from the 50s. That still is there on the square. I must admit, having done that several years later, when Paul Moraine came to visit the place a few years after it being built, he said, you know what, Graham, that old house is not lacquer. It's, well, didn't use the word lacquer, but he had some sort of Yorkshire way of explaining it. And we felt that the square needed a better edge to it than this little one-story house. So we've done designs to finish off the square, and unfortunately those still, and that's the one place we always felt would be a real iconic building, sort of like a town hall, but that hasn't happened. Yeah, it's we did then apply to have that building demolished, applied for the rights to do that, and we got that. So unfortunately, in a way, it won't have the history there, but maybe it's, yeah, maybe it's not the most amazing historical architecture around.
The pattern is taken from the past. A further question, Graham, if I may, definitely. From Nicholas Malandane. Great presentation, a master we can all learn from on how urban design and architecture fuse together to create an urban fabric that is relevant to society. Then Derek Libber says, thank you. Lynette Harding says, thanks, interesting, great presentation. And the kudos keep coming. Natalie van Sale, how long did it take to get approval to demolish? I think perhaps she's referring, I don't know whether she's referring to the heritage building. We can't go back to her, but the question from Natalie was, how long did it take to get approval to demolish? Yes, she corrected
that
me.
was
Speaking about the heritage building.
It was probably only 3 months or so at the time. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Emil, we need to wrap up. So, Graham, once again, thank you very, very much, colleagues. Emil has put together a slide presentation for us just to reflect on our second birthday, 20 of the present events we've had in the past. So we'll just run through that just briefly. I don't know, Emil, if you can screen that for us.
I'm busy with that at the moment.
Okay, right.
Thank you. Thank you, Graham. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.
From this side, I don't know what you're seeing.
Screen is showing, Emil, and it has got the plus sign on it.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you so much.
Can I just, thank you. Colleagues, you will recall when we started with SAIAshare, the concept, we likened it to T20 cricket. 2 presentations, as you have 2 innings in T20 cricket. And the concept was really fast, furious, and fantastic. And Graham, if I may compliment you once again, that's you've done just that. So thank you for sharing knowledge and experience, and to excite and inspire. That's the recipe that we aspire to. Now, if we run through briefly the presentations we've done, Corina, you can move on. We started out in May 2021 with Jackie Baruch, How to Speak to People, Marketing for Architects. Now, if I can just remind all of you that every one of these presentations is accessible, and we'll give you the links shortly. Andre Extien exhilarated us with a presentation. You can move on, Corina. Keep the ball rolling. Sydney gave us a very detailed explanation on the regulations for architects, referring to Treasury. If you are a bidder on government work, you need to look at that. David Peruton showed us the work that Peruton architects are doing down, especially in Cape Town, but abroad as well. What a pleasant presentation that was. Let me switch my camera off, then we can get Simi Peruton gave an excellent presentation on the business of practice. So if you really want to get stuck into how to run your practice properly, look at that. Luyanda Mpahla gave us a lovely presentation on the Radisson Red at the V&A waterfront. That was a very colorful presentation. Then we had Peter Barnard, a lawyer, speak to architects on P's and G's under the JBCC. And really, Contract Administration 101, do have a look at that. Abigail Alice gave us a rundown on her sketching and how sketching buildings has uncovered the emotional association people have with buildings. Colin Scott spoke to us on the new client architect agreement. Please remember that SAIA's client architect agreement is there to be used, and make sure that you make good use of it. It's really up to date with the requirements. Kevin Lloyd spoke to us on domestic architecture in estates. A thoroughly enjoyable presentation. Heather Dodd gave us a lovely presentation on shopping malls to town centres, and that would tie in very nicely with what Graham has been speaking about. Yandri Lema, architect from Nelspruit, Bombela, just gave us the best part of the landscape and the beautiful country we live in. Then we had, let's see, the next slide. Rad van Deventer spoke to us on the asset that we possess in a BIM context with the information that we have and how we can actually make a business from that. So do look at Rad's presentation. Tanzim Razak, the dichotomy of our city, a lot about urban renewal and urbanism as well. Do have a look at Tanzim's presentation. And your very own Emil just opened the door to the SAIA Compendium of Practice Guidelines. You'll be amazed what resources are available to you on the SAIA website. Compendium of Practice Guidelines, how to run your practice properly. Al Stratford, the master of making building components, spoke to us on the power of timber construction. So that will be an inspirational video to look at. Nabil Essa, a specialist when it comes to museums, heritage, and exhibitions. He gave us the ins and outs of that. Ian Ball gave us an inspiring presentation on a project that they did down in KwaZulu-Natal, where they accomplished the impossible by building a massive industrial building in a record time. And what were the key foundation, the key keys to doing that successfully. So do have a look at that. Tim Holmes on Architects Know Your Business. Tim is a business consultant, strategist, not an architect, but he knows business. And if you're thinking of how to structure your business and what are the fundamentals, do have a look at Tim's presentation. Then there was a lovely presentation by Nina and Fiona on the winning competition at Salt Lake University. Do have a look at that if you want to be inspired. Andre Nell spoke to us on solar and alternative energy sources. Paddy did a lovely presentation. He's an academic, but it was a thoroughly inspiring presentation. Experimental issues. Tanya Glovis gave us a rundown on alternative dispute resolutions, disagreements in the architectural profession and building industry. Paul Carter, if you want to see an inspirational presentation, do have a look at that. As Paul explained how he designed his house to have the sun shine down on a particular tile in the living room on the exact hour and date that his child was born. He has 2 sons, so you enjoy that most definitely. John Dovey, also from Osmond Lang, Adapt or Die, observations from 40 years of architectural practice. That was a thoroughly enjoyable one. And then Jonathan Noble spoke on the architecture of Peter Rich. A lovely presentation, and you might have seen that Jonathan won, was it Award of Merit or I forget now whether it was Award of Merit or Award of Excellence, but one of the two just now, very recently. And
yes, I think it was an Award of Merit, Eugene.
Award of Merit, great. There we are, thanks. Right. Then Henk Burgertman spoke on, amongst others, Menlyn Main, but you know, we know Henk as an architect beyond architecture, so he will inspire you with his presentation. Do have a look at that. We had Phil Mashabani speak to us on design morphosis. You know Phil's credentials, and it was a very thorough and thought-through presentation. I didn't realize that we'd covered so much ground. Jeremy Gibbert gave us a lovely presentation on, amongst others, feasibility studies. Now, you think feasibility studies is a mundane topic? Not at all. Have a look at Jeremy's presentation. And then Tiresh Govender, also a thoroughly inspiring presentation out of the box, amongst others on the topics that Graham has covered today. So you will enjoy Tiresh's presentation. Francois Norquer, I'm reminded, also from Osmond Lang. So we've really relied heavily on the expertise and knowledge of Osmond Lang on mass timber structures. And then a lovely presentation by Gerald Stein on Le Corbusier's regionalism. You will be inspired by that presentation. Chris Pearson, he's a PI insurance specialist, and if you are at all interested in your PI and risk coverage, then listen to Chris. Gerard Bosman did a well-prepared, thoroughly enjoyable, inspiring journey, in a sense, the traveling architect's voice. Be inspired by Gerard's presentation. Sure. Ian Alexander, Ian, as you know, has been in practice for, or was in practice for, the better part of 60 years, if I'm not mistaken. And just in a nutshell, his advice to us. Philip Nell on Instagram and the new social medias, but specifically Instagram, and how architects can promote their services. Right. Alex Ringelman, an excellent presentation, which scared the living daylights out of me, really, because he spoke, amongst others, about AI And AI is upon us much quicker than what I think even Alex thought. But Alex is a guru on smart systems. Listen to him, George van Gas, on the work that they're doing, and you will have noticed that George and them also won, I think, an award of merit and award of excellence, if I'm not mistaken, in the recent round. Hendrik Prinsloo, all the way from California, did an excellent presentation on construction delays and how to evaluate and adjudicate on delays. A very, very practical presentation. Philip Fouchier, what a joy just to see the work that SAIAshare is doing. I have no doubt that you will be inspired by the work that they are doing. And that probably brings us, yeah.
That does. That brings us to the first 20 SAIAshares, Eugene. And I think it's testament to you that you have firstly, such a passion and an involvement for this process. Each and every one of these presentations have been guided through the energies and the fortitude of Eugene. So we thank you so much for this process, Eugene, and for allowing us and yes, for taking the time every week and your patience and getting this on the roll. So thank you.
Okay, no, thank you, Emil. But please share with us where we can access these presentations.
Yes, here is the website. It is a bit of a long address. It is available. These presentations are available on the SAIA website, saia.org.za. If you click under Events and CPD, you will find them at the bottom of that page, along with also the SAIA transformation webinars. Thank you. That was the end of this.
Okay, Emil, if I'm not mistaken, they're also available on the ECPD website, but as we are offering this from SAIA practice, please make use and access these. Okay, colleagues, that brings us now to the next presentation, which I think you're going to enjoy just as much. And it's my privilege to introduce you to Eugene Marais. Two Eugenes on the screen at one time. If that's too much for you, well then just bear with me just for a few minutes. Let me see, right, here we are. Eugene Marais is an experienced architect with a master's degree in architecture from MMU, and that's where I studied as well, Eugene. So two Eugenes from the Seaside campus. You can gather from from what you're seeing on the screen. He's a postgraduate student in 3D printing architecture from the Institute of Advanced Architecture in Catalonia. I think that's Barcelona, and that's Gaudi's territory. So he currently works as a project architect at MMA Design Studio. He's part-time lecturer at the University of Johannesburg's Architecture Department, where he focuses on developing socio-economic, ecological architecture. Not going to go through that in detail. Eugene, I'd prefer to give you the time on screen. His niche area for research in public health is occupational and environmental health. He has an interest with research that is focusing on how artificial intelligence is impacting public health. Eugene, we look forward with anticipation to listening to your talk.
Thanks, Eugene.
The future. Please do take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, SAIA, for this event, and also to you guys for helping us to get all the technical things right and to get on board. Let me jump in. So, as an architect, so I guess to start today, what I want to present is a showcase of research I've conducted at UJ and IAC, as Eugene said, together with my journey into the exciting field of 3D printing architecture. So sorry. As an architect, I've produced architecture while working at MMA Design Studio, Mashabane Rose, and my own company, Studio ZA, for the last 15 years. In these projects, some of them shown here, our design intention has been to make architecture that exists as a dialogue in an environment. In that way, emanating a story that reveals the geographic, historic, or tectonic layers of a particular place at a particular time. The Slapo Museum, which was one of the first realized projects I was involved in, was an exercise in formal complexity and definitely set the tone for my interest in geometry. By far the most challenging aspect of the project was translating non-orthogonal geometries into two-dimensional drawings for construction. An intense drawing process and maximizing software technology was a vital part of the success of the project. I vividly recall the moment when the structural engineers presented their rationalization of the boulder forms. We had spent months refining in the creative process. Their logic, based on an orthogonal portal frame, was a surprise to me because the entire building was a non-orthogonal anatomy. I realized then that our ideas of sculptural freedom were incompatible with existing construction technology. Building organic forms with current methods would be prohibitively expensive and overly complicated. This experience ignited my passion for advancing construction solutions for design. While working in practice, I was invited to teach at UJ in the design studio for the past 6 years, where I developed an interest in the application of technologies. During this time, I was involved in ongoing discussions on the formation of the UJ Fab Lab with Denver Hendricks, the then HOD. The Fab Lab was eventually established in the Fado building with Trevor McGurk and Zelinda Yager respectively running the lab, and continuing to adopt new capacities from 3D printing to AR and VR. Given that architecture is a tailor-made solution for a unique site, it follows that building construction is the ultimate decentralized, customized industry. The Fab Lab allows architects and designers the opportunity to research and develop innovative solutions at a very low cost. Being hands-on in this way brings about a better understanding of the 3D spatial and formal problems and speeds up the process and quality of development. This ongoing relationship and work with the Fab Lab resulted in my being awarded a scholarship through UJ, and with the support of MMA, I was able to attend the postgraduate degree in 3D printing architecture at IAC. So IAC it's a top architecture school with a massive focus on fabrication, robotics, and parametric design. And it was a great place to experience and learn 3D printing. The program required a high level of parametric design skills, and we mostly worked in Grasshopper and Rhino and focused on building definitions that would allow for generative design. So the basic setup is that we used for sort of our prototyping in the beginning is a typical Ender 5 Creality desktop printer that gets hacked for like potter's clay. The clay goes into the cartridge, and we use clay because it simulates what we would later use in the large-scale printing process. With 3D printing, the settings like speed, nozzle size, flow rate, layer height, to name a few, are key to producing high-quality results. These aspects differ between machines and type of material, and so the best way to establish a good setup is by prototyping a basic form like a cylinder. And through an iterative process, all print parameters are documented, evaluated, and assessed for the optimum setting. To develop a deeper understanding of structural behavior, we were tasked to develop surfaces with the goal of building the largest cantilever. Various options are prototyped, and from the video, you can determine where the weaker points are from looking at what point the structure starts to buckle. Using simulations in Grasshopper and plugins such as Karamba, forms are assessed on the basis of their surface inclination, global and local inertia, and center of gravity. And with these aspects, you're able to take a form and advance that form and develop it. Once satisfied with the optimum design, we scaled up the size from that desktop printer, which is 4mm layer, to a KUKA robotic arm, which is 15mm, to see how each group's designs perform. Because it is deposited in a wet state, it has not yet reached optimum structural strength to carry the layers on top of it. Not only are you testing form, but also the construction process in terms of how many successive layers can be printed safely before you enter a risk area and sort of failure. So these lessons of structure are developed towards ideal infill patterns for walls. At first, different modular curves are drawn to experiment with the outcomes of different geometries. These modular curves are arrayed, lofted, and to produce a 3D form, with each infill pattern producing a different form with its own inherent potential. So our work at IAC would focus on developing these. So essentially, whatever you draw and extrude and print, even if it's sculptural, I think the focus at IAC started to become what generates geometry. And so the focus there was to say, let's develop form according to performance properties that we usually find in architecture by responding to the forces, stuff like water, heat, conductivity, air, and light. Our focus in my group was on light and developing the qualities of direct and diffused light in wall element. The typical opening type on the left is developed so that the infill pattern is altered to be responsive to the source of light. By tracing the direction of the source of light with vectors, it is possible to determine the percentage of light that actually enters through the wall. This might pertain to allowing morning light into a building or screening it. In this design, openings operate like apertures that open and close to allow varying degrees of light and privacy. At the same time, such mechanisms are designed within the limitations of what is possible to print. And so different elements are explored. Here, vertical apertures and gradients of openness, organic structures for diffused light, and other combinations that integrate conventional window as we know it. But the primary focus was to find a way to develop the quality of diffused light. By using a camera box, backlit images were taken of each model, demonstrating the actual effect produced by each design. While this process was highly revealing, quantifying how well each design compared to another required a form of measurement. And so we developed a tool in Grasshopper that would compute the number of white, black, and gray points derived from a desaturated image of the light designs. The gray range defines the diffused light range, and by measuring the points, we were able to determine which design performs best. Through such research prototypes, the infill pattern is slowly refined and rationalized. Different wall types are optimized for different performance functions. Because 3D printing is a new system of construction, not all conventional principles apply, and working through a process of adapting building elements was necessary. For example, in the case of the roof, understanding how a roof truss can be fixed and anchored into an earth wall where very little resistance is offered by the top layers of the printed wall. Instead, Trusses are taken into the wall system and locked into place to anchor the roof with the weight of the wall. The small-scale process of prototyping is in many ways similar to large-scale 3D printing, but scaling up requires further considerations. There is an array of materials that can be used for 3D printing and architecture. Given that this is an entirely new way to apply materials for the use in structures, material development might be one of the most exciting aspects of 3D printing. In our research at SAIAC, our focus was on developing earth material directly sourced from the site. Time is spent to learn about the different qualities of different types of earth materials, sand, clay, and organic soils. The earth is mixed with water, and different ingredients are added to strengthen the structural properties, such as fibers and enzymes. Through an iterative process, different mixes are tested for key criteria such as cracking, shrinkage, movement, pumpability, and so on. Once the best mix has been chosen, the material is tested at 1:1. With mix in order and a WASP crane printer installed at the SAIAC Valdaro site, 18 students, we 18 students, set about constructing the first earth-printed building in Spain. Based on all the research conducted during the program, principles and typical building elements are integrated to create a unified living unit. And we'll just, sorry, I'm just opening a movie video.
Located at our mountainside campus, the Valdaro Labs, in the outskirts of Barcelona, SAIAC fabricated the first earthen 3D printed housing prototype of Spain. Given that buildings are responsible for 36% of CO2 emissions, this project is made with fully natural materials to reduce the CO2 impact of construction. The soil is extracted on-site, and the material recipe is optimized with enzymes and fibers for structural and elastic performance when used for 3D printing. From intensive research into the local soil's properties, TOVA emerges as a prototype made of durable geopolymers for substructure, composite natural soil mixture for the walls, and a timber structure and joinery details for the roof. The design includes built-in ergonomic 3D printed furnishings and openings that filter daylight. The integrative wall system incorporates passive cavity ventilation and heat conductivity to optimize airflow for cooling and heat insulation, as well as a waterproof coating for the earth. SAIAC's ongoing research endeavor showcases the potential of 3D printing on-site construction as a solution to some of the world's existing housing and climate challenges.
So, at the outset of the Spain journey, I was aware of the UJ Engineering faculty's research into 3D printing concrete based at the SMUCT Research Center here in Joburg. The center's strategic objective is to use innovative building technologies to support government in social infrastructure development. And so, through conversations with Prof. Jeffrey Mahaji, head of the school, upon my return to SA, work in 3D printing was about to kick off. Our first research project was to print an RDP house, one of the first in SA, a project which is funded by the Department of Science and Innovation and the KZN Department of Human Settlements and several industry partners. The idea being to develop know-how within SA and to test the feasibility of 3D printing within the social housing sector. We were aided by SAIB, a Dutch 3D printing company, over a 2-week period that resulted in a considerable transfer of skills that would enable the team to function independently. Working with concrete was so different to working with earth. The tried and tested nature of concrete makes it a reliable option and an obvious choice for industry adoption. Where clay would take a few days to be completely dry, this special concrete mortar takes but 3 to 5 minutes to set hard. This means walls grow out of the ground with rapid speed, taking only 33 minutes to build a wall that would take 2 bricklayers a day to complete. Here, the robotic arm deposits mortar in layers through the nozzle, moving at between 50 and 500 millimeters a second. We finished the house walls during this 2-week period, but calculated that when aggregated, the actual printing time for the whole building was approximately 8 hours. Notice the angling on the robotic arm as it reaches the adjacent wall to prevent the arm from colliding into the wall. The project was successfully launched at the UJ Doornfontein campus and has proven the importance of partnerships between government, industry, and universities to enable a culture of innovation. This week, we were doing demonstrations to various stakeholders to build awareness and confidence in this new technology, a necessary part of the process to ensure its uptake in the market. This wall here, printed also for thermal testing, that will be done as part of our Agrimar certification process. This includes testing for various performance aspects. For example, the wall hanging there was transported for fire testing. An Agrimar certificate proves that a new building system is fit for purpose, and this can be used to demonstrate compliance with the national building regulations to gain approvals at council so we can take 3D printing out of the lab and into the city. With the first project successfully completed, we are at the early stages of focusing on what a future typology could look like in RDP housing, how we can rethink elements such as the roof, which could in part be either supported by prefabricated 3D printed structures or printed out entirely as a shell structure. By mapping the orientation of the external skin of the buildings, these maps can be used to adapt buildings to the climate. One example is where we alter the wall surface by introducing self-shading dimples. In the diagram on the right, sunlight hours are shown for a north-facing wall for 1 month between Feb and Jan, blue representing 0 hours versus yellow for full exposure. The dimples demonstrate that it is possible to significantly reduce the heat gain on the surface of the structure, creating a passive cooling effect with only geometry, which would cost roughly the same in terms of material and time. Testing on these systems are already on their way, and in partnership with the University of the Free State, we've recently developed our own local 3D concrete mortar mix with which we've built the structure. The work at SMACT will continue to advance 3D printing technology to make it ready for uptake in the market while doing it in an environmentally kind of conscious way. In closing, architecture is intricately connected to construction, and very often entire movements of architecture originate from new breakthroughs in building technology. That is not to say technology is the most significant factor, only it is certainly a powerful medium of the expression of ideas. This is particularly pertinent within the fourth industrial revolution, where navigating technology becomes a culture of daily discovery. I believe 3D printing will eventually become mainstream and offer us a very unique way of working directly with 3D models to implement precise construction without the need for 2D drawings. There is certainly something absurd about taking a 3D object and making it 2D to make it 3D again. And I would question the value we actually add when compared to the time spent doing this. Given the impact of the construction industry on the environment, a great need exists to transform the sector. The benefits of 3D printing in architecture are numerous: increases in speed, productivity, and accuracy, and reductions in waste, material volume, and greater affordability for complex geometries. 3D printing also offers new opportunities for material development. As demonstrated by the Tova earth-printed building, such material technologies could advance the construction industry into a far more sustainable one. Our team we're currently busy planning a training program to develop knowledge and certification in 3D printing. And we are really sincere about building a community here in South Africa. So if you want to know more, please reach out. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that.
Eugene, it's been a wonderful, wonderful presentation to look at. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing something new to us. And I'm reminded of the Orwell brothers when they took the first flight. It was apparently reported either by them or by someone that it's interesting, but it can never become commercially viable to fly. And I think that 3D printing is building is probably the same. You've been very disciplined in your presentation, and I thank you most sincerely. But I'm going to have to skip the Q&A session. Otherwise, we've already run out of time, but not because of you. So I'm going to just repeat your email address for those who have sent in questions and who have responded. Please, if you don't mind, respond directly to Eugene. Ken Lever sent in a few questions. Quinton, Johan Pansegrou, Derek Libbe, Reese Pritchard. Colleagues, if I can ask you, Eugene's email address is eugene.m@uj.ac.za. If I am not mistaken, Eugene, is that correct?
That's correct, thanks.
Okay, please feel free. And Karen, thank you for ending off fabulous. What did you say? The fabulous, fantastic presentation, and we agree to that. Colleagues, permit me then just to thank once again Graham and Eugene on your behalf for two exceptional presentations. I have no doubt you've enjoyed them and found them inspiring. That brings us to the end of SAIAshare number 23. Please don't leave if you can. I just have an important an important slide to share with you. We trust you've enjoyed the afternoon with us. SAIAshare is held in service of the profession and to your benefit. We hope you will continue to support the program. SAIAshare carries one CPD value of 0.1. You will receive an email from SAIA within a few weeks to download your certificate. If you do have problems with that, Corina, I'm going to suggest that they just contact you. Now, we invite you to join us again on the first Friday of June. We have two very special presentations again for you. I am sure you will enjoy listening to the presentations by two esteemed, eminent architects, Nadia Tromp, who runs her own practice. Nadia is an internationally celebrated and multiple award-winning architect. You will, I'm sure, enjoy Nadia's presentation and be inspired by it. And Stan Siegel. Stan needs no introduction, with more than 60 years of experience in the profession. And I think he's been happily married, he says, for 62 years. And that's quite something. You need to listen to Stan share his wealth of experience and knowledge with us. Colleagues, then in closing, we leave today's SAIAshare on a very sad note. SAIAshare was one of Sue Linning's final projects in service of the architectural community. She was there when SAIAshare was conceived and conceptualized, and she was part of SAIAshare from the start until she retired. Sue died unexpectedly of a heart attack on Monday, the 1st of May, in Oudtshoorn, Western Cape, at the age of 75. We will all miss her tremendously. She was awarded the Institute's Gold Medal of Distinction in September 2012, and this citation really summarizes Sue and the profession. Understanding the needs of the profession, this architect turned executive officer set about nurturing the membership, the network which makes up the Institute and for which communication is crucial. She set up a process to involve and integrate members for a transforming network. And despite the biennial changes in leadership, with a quiet demeanor, sharp wit, and excellent memory, not only kept the Institute together, but made the Institute a coherent and well-managed body that members value and enjoy being part of. The Medal of Distinction is presented to Sue Linning by her colleagues, the board, regional committees, and the membership at large, with affection and respect in recognition for her dedicated service in the advancement of the profession of architecture. Colleagues, Sue's contribution to the Institute and the profession was profound. Sue will be remembered as a loving wife, mother and grandmother, a loyal friend, a dedicated professional, and an outstanding executive, the confidante to many Institute presidents, and a valued mentor to colleagues. May her soul rest in peace. And so that brings us to the conclusion. Please join us for SAIAshare number 24 on the 2nd of June, if you are able, and have a lovely weekend. Goodbye.